Hello once again to the Vipercast. I'm Matt Donnelly, and this is the Tera Roberts. That's Miss Fantasy for those who need to know. And we are going to talk about starts and sits players here. That's right. Must start and must sit players at each positioning entering week number 4. And Tara, we are on to week number 4 already. That used to be the quarter point of each and every season before we expanded to a 17-game season, 18 weeks. This was typically the make or break week for a lot of fantasy rosters. If you were 0-3, this was a week you had to win. This was a must-win week for you out there. So with us and our starts and sits, that's what we're here to do. We're here to help you get that first win of the season. We're here to help you stay undefeated. We're also here to keep you in that playoff race because once you make it to the fantasy playoffs, anything can happen, including Justin Jefferson laying an absolute egg in your fantasy championships. With that being said, we are going right off the presses here this week. Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce, Jason Kelce, DeAndre Swift. What is the better Kelce-Swift combination in the National Football League?
It's DeAndre Swift and Jason Kelce. I'm not in on the Travis and Taylor. Yeah, that's not the Kelce the Swift combination for me.
So who are the true Swifties out there? Are those the Taylor Swift fans? Or are those the managers of DeAndre Swift? Who are the true Swifties?
The Taylor Swift Swifties are rather passionate. Whereas the DeAndre Swift Swifties were super passionate and then our souls got beat down a little bit. And so we are not we're the heartbroken Swifties. There should actually be a song written about us. So that's my position. Yes.
Well, I got a feeling that Travis Kelce is going to have a song written about him much quicker than maybe the rest of us when it comes to DeAndre Swift. Now, speaking of sad songs, what about my man there, Kirk Cousins? He basically rolls up to Los Angeles in a minivan, throws for almost 400 yards, and his team goes to 0-3 this season. That's right. Kirk Cousins, quarterback 1. He's on pace for like 6,000 yards passing, probably like 60 touchdowns. The best quarterback since Peyton Manning, and yet he's 0-3. And we're possibly talking about rumors about him becoming a New York Jet. What's going on with the Minnesota Vikings and Kirk Cousins?
Kirk has never been the problem. Was he the solution to overcome all of the inequities that Minnesota had? No, but there's not many quarterbacks that can be that solution. But he was never the problem. Minnesota got what they got, in my opinion. They made the choice for some strange reason to not make any significant improvements to their defense. You look at the team like their counterparts in the North, Detroit, who made clear free agency ads, draft. They were very clear in exactly what they were doing to improve their defense. And Minnesota just kind of I don't know what they were expecting. You can't just have guns blazing offense. You got all the weapons in the world. So this is not shocking at all. Between Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, even KJ Osborne, they're stacked, man. They're stacked and they will continue to be successful. So Kirk could continue this overall QB1 path because they're going to have to throw because that defense is not stopping anybody.
Yeah, well, this week I think they're going to probably rely on the run maybe a little bit more because Carolina, they've been horrible at stopping the run and they've been pretty good at stopping the pass. So maybe we see a little bit of a change of philosophies here in week number 4, but another philosophy that never changes is if you're going to start an Olympic relay team, you're starting there with the Miami Dolphins. 5 of the top 5 NFL recorded speeds this season on a carry have belonged to the Miami Dolphins. That's Tyreek Hill. That's Devin Achane. By the way, Achane, not Achane anymore. That's been corrected for us this week. And Raheem Mostert. Top 5 runs this season, all belonging to this Miami Dolphins team. They play the Buffalo Bills this week. Is there any way that the Buffalo Bills can slow this Dolphins offense down?
Yeah, somewhat. New England was able to do it, but you slow them down to an extent. the thing that I've been doing a lot of, stuff around HN and whether or not, how to what degree can he be successful in that backfield with Raheem Mostert? Like, what are we doing with these two backs? And the thing about that backfield and why they are both, Raheem Mostert is still the RB1, but HN can be a weekly reliable fantasy asset in your flex for the mere fact that no one is trying to stop the run for Miami. That is, you don't pull up to that team and say, man, we got to stop Mostert and HN. No, you're looking at Tua and Tyreek and Waddle, and you're saying, I have to stop the pass. You got to beat me on the ground. So, from that perspective, the team, it's tough because it's tough to defend them because you try to stop them one way, they're going to thrive on the ground. It's just so well-rounded. They've done just such a good job. So Buffalo can slow them down for sure. They've got a solid defense and excellent defense coming off a fantastic performance. The fantasy points, Jesus Christ, it was amazing. Went 100% in on Buffalo and DFS. It was beautiful. But they can stop it to a degree, but you're still going to get strong offense out of this game. So this is going to be a fun matchup.
It really is, because we just watched the Miami Dolphins put up 70 points, something that has not been done since 1966. And they did this without Jalen Waddle even in their lineup, another guy who's considered to be among the fastest players in the game today. Speaking of some of those fast players, talk about Raheem Mostert, 46 fantasy points last week. He's now the RB1 through the first 3 weeks of the season. When we're talking about the war of attrition here at the running back position, all these running backs getting hurt, and the one running back who's had that injury label to him much of his career is Raheem Mostert, and yet he's the healthiest back of them all right now. 46 fantasy points last week. If it wasn't for Chan there going up for 51.3, this would have been Mostert. We're talking about a running back. Leads all running backs in fantasy. Not Saquon Barkley, not Christian McCaffrey, Raheem Mostert. And you know what? I don't think this is the last of what we've seen of him. How long can Mostert keep this up this season?
I mean, he played a full 16 last season. I think it's just about mitigating volume. Again, he was still under. He played a full 16. He was still under 200 carries. So this man has never saw more than 200 carries in a season. So that's where you kind of got to look at this and say, HN has to be involved, because just, pure body wise, you can't put that level of workload on him. And if you help mitigate that aggressive workload on him, then maybe he can last a full season again. So it's possible. It is very possible that they figured out how to make him last season, and they'll try to utilize it and do it again. So you got to buy into it.
Speaking of buying in, do you buy into the fact that Jonathan Taylor could still be a Colt when he comes back? Like, we're talking about the Jonathan Taylor versus Jim Irsay type conversations. We had this conversation all off season leading to this point. Well, looks like Taylor's going to pass his physical. We heard that I think your Green Bay Packers offered up 2 mid-round draft picks for him. The Miami Dolphins are, the Miami Dolphins need any more help. They've also been linked to Jonathan Taylor. We know that Taylor still wants a trade. We know that water is wet. Do we see this going down anytime soon?
I think Miami's out of the picture. I think they were interested and they dabbled, but there's 0 point to them making that trade. Green Bay, I now see why they were considering it, because while Aaron Jones is their RB1, so this is not a knock on Aaron Jones at all. But AJ Dillon, man, they might have saw something during the offseason. He has not looked good. Highly disappointing. So maybe that's why they were interested in kind of trying to mitigate the risk there. But the thing about, I think we might be kind of looking at the previous teams that were interested and not realizing that there may be other suitors. Like, I can see a Baltimore jumping in there now. I could see a Cleveland jumping in there now. We've got teams with real needs now at running back because they lost their RB1. So I don't think he is. I think the Colts would make it work because, again, why would you not want to? But I don't know if what they're going to offer what Jonathan Taylor is looking for. Therefore, I think the trade is the most likely scenario.
All right. Well, I think you touched base there on A.J. Dillon a little bit. Probably the reason why he's struggling is his thighs are too big and they're rubbing together. I mean, that is my expert physics type approach to it. A little bit of friction getting created there. He can't quite get the momentum he wants, and he's getting stopped in the backfield. Now, Tera, I know your heart was smiling today. Austin Eckler out there playing slap hands with his teammates. Looks like he's back on the field. And Josh Kelly, man. Josh Kelly. This dude was a guy that we all jumped at the waivers on week number 1. If you didn't, you're lying right now because everyone did. Everyone saw the opportunity in this Kellen Moore offense. We saw Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. We saw that dynamic work last season. Josh Kelly, we're like, hey, this guy's got a great opportunity with Austin Eckler out. I saw your tweet about the little eye-rolling girl there. I'm like, nailed it. Basically, that nailed Austin Eckler had nothing to worry about the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, he proved his point. I think, like, I don't ever want to say that someone was overselling an injury because injuries are real, and you are well within your right to hold yourself out as long as you feel like you need to protect your body and heal longer. But at the core of it, you gotta wonder, like, was a point trying to be made here? And he made said point. He is Austin Eckler. You're not replacing him. There is no replacement for him. Okay, you think you got this? Roll with Joshua Kelly. See what happens. Oh, okay. How much am I worth now? Yeah. So I can't wait to get him back.
Whatever that price tag was, it doubled in his absence. Now, some other price tags going around there. Just some quick hitters here. The Jets, they need a quarterback. They went out there and they signed Trevor Siemian. That's probably not the answer. We already heard the disconnect going on in the Jets locker room there. Robert Saleh has been an apologist for Zach Wilson, who has completely lost that room, according to reports out of some of our favorite beat writers in New York. Take that as you will, but hey, things are going to go from bad to worse in New York here in the coming weeks. The Cardinals, they knocked off the Dallas Cowboys in a game that nobody saw going down the way it went down. We're going to talk about this here a little bit more in a second. But, Tera, we look at some of the more exciting, disappointing moments from week number 3. What caught your attention?
I mean, beyond no, you know what? Shout out to Andy Dalton. What caught my attention is that Seattle defense has been absolutely reeling. And you need to monitor, like, I do a weekly injury report, and I vividly remember, like, I track every single week. I stare at the injury reports for every single team. I type out every single offensive and defensive name. I have not seen anything. New Orleans was the only team last year that has kind of rivaled what we saw with Seattle over the past couple of weeks. I've never seen anything that deep. The entire secondary, like, you got to really pay attention to be able to call a lot of these things where you may be able to jump in and play a quarterback that no one is expecting to thrive, because obviously maybe they're a bad quarterback or an aged quarterback like Andy Dalton. You've seen better years, but you are falling into the ideal situation due to injuries. So just kind of keep your eye out on that, because that just was massive. Just massive.
And for me, it's the tight end position again this week. Nobody could have predicted the tight ends performing the way they did. When you look at the top 10 tight ends from week number 3, Donald Parham scored 2 touchdowns in a game in which the Chargers beat the Vikings, where Josh Oliver scored a touchdown. Then you take a look at Pharaoh Brown, who's not even a real Pharaoh, by the way. I fact-checked this. He has nothing to do with Egypt. This is the truth, and I'm even more disappointed now than I was before this all went down. And then my man, Brevin Jordan. I've been wanting this guy to be something for so long. He's been on my Dynasty mustache performing players here for the last couple seasons. He even got in the action and was a top 10 fantasy tight end. Then again, it doesn't take a lot to become a top 10 fantasy tight end. I mean, 5 catches, 41 yards. That's pretty much where the bar is set at the tight end position. But these guys were out there catching, like Gerald Everett. We talked about him not being a good tight end, matchup based, but not Donald Parham getting 2 touchdowns. TJ Hawkinson's in Minnesota. What the heck is Josh Oliver catching touchdowns for? Some of this did not make any sense, and it absolutely crushed a lot of fantasy managers. With that being said, the one place that you can kind of recover some of that is on the waivers. And I know by the time that people catch all this show, they're going to already have those waiver claims in and whatnot. But who was your number one waiver target heading into week number 4?
I mean, it was Devon Achane. One of these days we'll figure out how to consistently say his name right. But yeah, it was him for sure. I mean, you have to, again, I won't dive super deep in it because we already talked about it with Raheem Mostert and the Miami offense as a whole. You have to buy into it because we know they want to operate as a split backfield, and we know that it's going to be difficult for this team to, or not difficult for, it's difficult for defenses facing this team because they can't focus on stopping the run. And these are two electric running backs, and Achane's going to be a contributor every single week. I don't see Jeff Wilson as a threat coming back. I can't see it. We'll hey, we'll wait and see, but I feel very confident in the level of volume that Achane's going to get as the RB2 in that offense.
And for me, I'm turning my attention to Los Angeles. One man's misfortune is another man's opportunity. Canada's greatest export to California since maple syrup is Joshua Palmer there. And he's going to once again get that opportunity to be that number 2 wide receiver after Mike Williams, unfortunately, was lost for the season due to that ACL injury. Palmer, he scored a touchdown, caught 4 of 7 passes there for 66 yards. This week, he's facing a Raiders team, so you can basically slide him right into a flex spot and feel comfortable about that because the Raiders are allowing the 3rd most fantasy points this season, and the team has also given up 5 touchdowns to wide receivers. The only question is right now is who's the wide receiver 1 this week? Is it Devontae Adams or is it Keenan Allen? I don't know, but both these guys are going to absolutely go off in this matchup because neither one of these secondaries can stop a damn thing. Now, Tara, when we talk about our hits and misses, give me your biggest miss, followed up by your biggest hit. Let's go do a little bit of victory laps.
Oh, man. Matt, I would say my biggest hit, and I'm just speculating here because I didn't do the proper preparation. It's been a hectic, crazy day. And by the way, guys, Matt's not boring if you're watching on YouTube and seeing me yawn constantly. I've just been up since like 4:30 in the morning. So, and it's like 9:30 my time at night. So I'm just tired. Matt is awesome. My yawning is no indication. But some of my biggest hits, I would say that, this is not going to be super innovative or anything, but it's easiest for me to, off memory, reach to DFS. Tank Dell was one of my biggest hits this week, and trusting the volume that he was getting, the increase in involvement in the offense. He looks fantastic, performing at such a high level. And I feel like it's going to stick because I believe in CJ Stroud. He looks fantastic. He fits the part. He is giving us everything that he was supposed to give us. He was supposed to give us accuracy. He was supposed to give us poise. He was supposed to give us precision. He is giving all of us those things in one fantastic package on a team that we all thought was going to be absolute trash on offense, but it turns out they're pulling it together very well. And because their defense can't stop the run, they're pushing extreme pass volume, and it's working out very well, and it's really benefiting Tank Dell. So I love what I'm seeing out of him. Been very confident in him, and that would be one of my biggest hits. One of my misses for the week. And we'll talk about this guy in a little bit. Justin Fields. I really thought he would be fine this past week, continuing on rolling him out. And we just underestimated, and I know I underestimated just in evaluating now, and I see it, that the team has not made progress at all. The upgrade to DJ Moore was cool and all, but the team as a whole, like, okay, you've got a little bit of a shiny new toy, but you've made zero progress on last year. It looks like you have started right off at square one of where you are. They're a hot mess right now. And we'll talk about Justin Fields more, but that was one that I missed. We'll see if I'm doubling down on it.
You can almost make the argument that they're regressing there in Chicago, especially as a passing offense. They're passing more than they did last season, but the results have not been the same. Chicago, they need to get back to their roots here, back to that run game. And if I want to take a hit, I might as well talk about that Texans offense. I didn't write that down, but I low-key was in on this Texans offense a good portion of the offseason. Not saying that they're going to be great. I said, watch out for this team. They're going to be better than expected. Nico Collins was one of my guys at the beginning of the season. Love Nico Collins. We're starting to see those targets come in there. And Tank Dell finally popping off. This is a guy that C.J. Stroud wanted at the draft. He went to the Texans and said, I want Tank Dell. He got Tank Dell, and we saw like a 31 or 32% first read target rate there for Tank Dell. So good things are coming. The better Tank Dell does, the more it's going to open up things for Nico Collins. But we talk about my misses. I did not see Zach Moss doing what Zach Moss did last week. That was on me. I should have known better, but hey, I played the percentages. Jerome Ford, I guess you could call a miss for me. I'm not taking it as a miss. He got 2 touchdowns that bailed him out. He wasn't that good. I'm sorry. Jerome Ford was not that good. 10 carries, 18 yards. I'm not calling that a miss, even though he had the fantasy production. But I said, sit Jerome Ford because that Tennessee Titans run defense is that good. Luckily, he got bailed out by a couple touchdowns along the way. But for my biggest hit, and sometimes, hey, fantasy is a crazy thing. Sometimes you stumble upon things by accident. I got into a league. I started James Conner and Marquise Brown against the Dallas Cowboys, and they both popped off for me. And I started these guys on purpose. I mean, I had other options out there, but I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to stick with my guys. I'm going to put them out there. And I almost won my matchup. If it wasn't for Raheem Mostert, I would have won my matchup last week, starting James Conner and Brown against the Dallas Cowboys. So I feel pretty good about that. Now, Tara, we're going to go to our must-starts and must-sit players here for week number 1, starting at the quarterback position. Who do you got starting and who do you got sitting?
I am starting Justin Fields. I know it has been frustrating, but the thing is you can't bail out now. This is not the time to sit him. I know it's been rough. He is underwhelmed. It has been frustrating. I was looking at best ball teams the other day, and it's shocking that I've got multiple best ball teams where Justin Fields and Sam Howell drafted on the same team. And I've been relying on Sam Howell. He's been the one has been producing the points. That is, not last week, but it's been shocking. Absolutely crazy. But this matchup against Denver is just way too juicy. I can't remember if I talked about their defense earlier, but week 1, Jimmy Garoppolo, not a massive game, but he looked good against them, ran an efficient offense, 2 touchdowns. Week 2, Sam Howell, strong game, 299 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, looked good. Brian Robinson, lit them up on the ground. Week 3, got obliterated by Tua. Week 4, you can't tell me that even accounting for and saying that Justin Fields has regression, I can't wrap my mind around the thought that he could be less than Sam Howell. And I like Sam Howell, but I have to believe in my core that he is going to outproduce Sam Howell in this matchup and finally give us a good Justin Fields game, give us a nice 25 to, we'll be modest, say 25 to 30 fantasy points. So it's Justin Fields. My sit is Deshaun Watson. Was happy to see him produce in the matchup that he should have produced in last week. Fantastic. You should, if you cannot produce against Tennessee, you've got a major problem. So at the very least, we saw he did produce against Tennessee. So that's a good sign for things to come in the future. But I don't like this matchup for him against Baltimore. I think it's going to be, a tough divisional matchup, closer than we expect. Cleveland's got an incredibly strong defense. This is not an ideal game. I will not be playing Deshaun Watson.
I agree. Yeah, no, I'm right there. I did my starts and sits here over at Rotoballer here, and Deshaun Watson's name certainly came up there. And you know what? I'm an idiot sometimes, and I'm kind of going right back to Justin Fields as well. And you mentioned some good things about his passing ability, but we just watched Chan and Mostert light this team up on the ground. If the Bears truly get back to the ground and pound, which I'm expecting them to get to, that's going to be where Fields is going to run for like 150 yards. And that's going to be fantasy goals for us. For me, I'm starting. I wanted to go originally. My original start was Andy Dalton, but earlier today we found out that it looks like Bryce Young is going to be back in the lineup this week. if I'm Carolina, I'm not too sure if I'm going back to Bryce Young. I might say, hey, young kid, watch the veteran go out there and get things done, because Andy Dalton was a thing of beauty. 364 yards, completed like 42 of 58 passes. He was out there being the old red rifle that we know and love. Unfortunately, I can't recommend him right now because I don't know who the quarterback's going to be. That being said, another quarterback that I don't even know is going to play this week is Jimmy Garoppolo, because if he does start, this is a great matchup for him. He's currently in concussion protocol. That could mean that the Aiden O'Connell era is about to begin. And you know what? Tera, you just talked a little bit earlier about sneaky starts. Jimmy Garoppolo is sneaky enough, but if you want to go stealth mode here, Aiden O'Connell had a good preseason. He could be that guy. I mean, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to go out there and say, hey, start Aiden O'Connell over Daniel Jones, or am I? You know what? Maybe no. I'm going to temper those expectations right now. I'm going to temper those expectations just a little bit. But look, you got a pretty simple job there in Vegas. Feed Devontae Adams. That's all you got to do. The guy's already upset that this team isn't winning enough. Just keep feeding the guy the ball. If you can't get him the ball, Jacoby Myers is making things happen. Jimmy Garoppolo's averaging 7.5 yards per attempt out there. And this week, Garoppolo and the Raiders, they face a Chargers team that just gave up 365 yards and like a trifecta of touchdowns to Kirk Cousins and his Cole-wearing physique. And we're talking about the Chargers team that's given up over 1,000 yards passing already this season in just 3 games. Opposing quarterbacks are averaging 24.6 fantasy points per game. And if there's ever time for Jimmy to smile, that gorgeous smile of his, it's going to be this week. If he's available, he is absolutely going to ball out. I think I might have a man crush on Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know how I feel about that right now. Anyway.
Embrace it. It's Jimmy G.
Oh, yeah. You can't go wrong with Jimmy G. You can't even hate the guy. I mean, the dude's like better looking than I could ever imagine. And I'm not even mad at him for it. Usually I get mad at that with better looking dudes than myself, but I just can't get mad at Jimmy. Maybe it's the smile. Maybe the smile does it for me. But one guy that simply doesn't do it for me, maybe he's got great hair. And maybe that's the problem here. Maybe I'm just jealous because Jimmy Garoppolo, I have a smile. I can work with that. Trevor Lawrence has hair. I can't get back to having hair. So maybe this is a hair envy thing. Maybe there's too much hair in Trevor Lawrence's eyes. But right now, I can't trust Trevor Lawrence. He is out of my circle of trust. It is that simple. He went from one of my must-start players each and every week, one of my top 8 quarterbacks, to a guy that I can't even put in my lineup, a guy that Brock Purdy's better than, a guy that I'm sitting there going, hey, maybe should I start CJ Stroud? Should I start Jordan Love? These are not questions you should be answering in week number 4 of starting over Trevor Lawrence, but here we are. And it's not like he's playing in a team that's world beaters when it comes to the quarterback position. Atlanta, they're still giving up over 15 fantasy points per game. However, this Atlanta Falcons team, they're pretty good when it comes to defending wide receivers and defending running backs, which is something that we probably weren't expecting heading into the season. But 64% passing, 736 yards passing, 3 touchdowns passing, 2 interceptions. Those are not must-start numbers from Trevor Lawrence, a guy that we had a lot of faith in, being like, you know what? This is the last guy I trust as being my quarterback 1. He has not been trustworthy. So he, for me, is on the sit against the Atlanta Falcons this week. Now, turn your attention to the running back position, Tera. Who you got starting? Who do you got sitting?
I'm starting James Cook. I know that's not innovative, but some people are a little bit concerned about the lack of usage that he has at the goal line, and that is frustrating. I get that. When we're seeing Latavius Murray get, he's got touchdowns in both of the past 2 games. We've got Damian Harris even getting a touchdown, barely on the field, and he still gets goal line opportunities. You wish that James Cook could just be finally given the opportunity to be a full and complete back, but he is getting volume. He's not lacking 4 touches. They're utilizing him in terms of touches as a true lead back. Snap count, true lead back. He's just not getting those goal line touches. But if you're feeling apprehensive, don't even question it. If you give me a start-sit question, I'm still saying James Cook. It's James Cook all day. We are rolling him out no matter what. My sit is going to be Ramondre Stevenson. in Dallas, and a tough defensive matchup, although we just did see James Conner have success against them. But it is Ezekiel Elliott's revenge game. And I can't, even the cold, cold heart of Bill Belichick, I can't fathom that he is so cold that he will not let Zeke get enough carries to be able to execute his revenge against Dallas. So Ramondre Stevenson might be a little shaky this week.
I like that Ezekiel Elliott. Not you didn't say he would be a start, but I think he's one of those sneaky starts for you in a revenge game. There's a lot of revenge going on this week. I do also like your comments there when we talk about some of those running backs that we're starting here as well, because I'm right with you. James Cook, this is a guy that's going to be a top 10 running back this week, no matter how you want to look at it. Miami, we know how explosive this team is. The best way to do that is to run the ball and keep it away from them. And I think the Buffalo Bills, that's probably going to be their best defense against this Miami offense, is to keep the ball away. Now, another player that you should probably keep the ball away, we're going to go to Seattle here. We're going to talk about Kenneth Walker, simply because the New York Giants are one of just 7 teams this season that have allowed more than 25 fantasy points per game to the running back position. Now, we know that Christian McCaffrey, he went off for about 85 yards and a touchdown on 18 carries, and he also had about 34 more yards on 5 receptions on Thursday Night Football. But as good as McCaffrey was, Kenneth Walker was even better. He had a couple touchdowns to go with his 156 yards on 21 touches there. But more impressive is the fact that this Seattle team is giving Walker the ball on the 5-yard line and inside of that, because they've given him the ball 7 times so far this season. Last season, Seattle only had 10 carries inside the 5. That's a huge step for the Seattle Seahawks offense. And my sitter this week, it's Joe Mixon. Look, the rules in fantasy football, the rules in life are pretty simple. Rule number 1, you don't talk about Fight Club. Rule number 2, you start your tight ends against the Las Vegas Raiders. And rule number 3, never, and I mean never, start your running backs against the Tennessee Titans. We just talked about this. Jerome Ford, yeah, okay, you got lucky with your 2 touchdowns, but you only had 18 yards on 10 carries. You had 51 total yards in that game thanks to some passing. 51 yards is not a good fantasy week, unless you are a tight end, apparently. This is not the tight end position we're talking about. I am sitting Joe Mixon this week against Tennessee. That and the fact, if you want to start Joe Burrow, this is the week to start Joe Burrow. This is a get-right week for Joe Burrow, because this Tennessee Titans secondary is not very good. It's the opposite of their run defense. So that's an area that which you can attack. So Tara, speaking of attacking teams, let's talk about attacking teams through the air, through the passing game. Now that we've already talked about the quarterbacks, let's talk about the wide receivers. Who are you starting this week and who are you sitting?
I'm starting Nico Collins. It's simple here. I like to target receivers in particular that are coming off of underwhelming performances where they should have, theoretically had the ball fed to them a little bit more. Nico Collins has been operating as the wide receiver 1 in that offense. And I don't feel this. I love takedown, and he's definitely someone that I'm starting moving forward. But I don't feel like Nico Collins has lost his wide receiver 1 status within that offense. I think that he's still, the 1A of that 1B situation, if we want to call it that. And I feel like this is a good time to pivot back to Nico coming off of that very disappointing game, that they'll push a little bit more volume towards him, and that maybe the script will be a little bit better as well, because that might have also had something to do with it, the way that they absolutely dominated that game. But this matchup against Pittsburgh should be fairly competitive. Pittsburgh's defense has been vulnerable. So I'm going back to Nico Collins as my start. And then my sit is going to be DeAndre Hopkins. No offense to DeAndre Hopkins, because I don't think this is his fault. I don't think that this is DeAndre Hopkins' fault. It's not Derrick Henry's fault. It's not Traylon Burke's fault. It's not Chig Okonkwo's fault. This is a bad offense. The offensive line is terrible. The Ryan Tannehill has been playing awful. Just as a whole, they cannot produce. And I don't see any, for all its faults that Cincinnati has had, they have continued to remain, fairly stout on defense. And I just don't feel like Ryan Tannehill is truly going to be able to exploit this, despite the fact that they are probably going to have to pass for high volume to keep up with to keep up with Joe Burrow attacking that Tennessee secondary. I just don't think he'll be able to. I think this is going to be a disaster, and I think this might be the game where Tennessee really looks at itself and starts to reevaluate if they can actually move forward in a competitive way.
Zach Wilson for Ryan Tannehill. Who says no to that trade right now? I don't know. Probably both teams, to be honest with you. Nico Collins and Tank Dell. I love this duo. I talked about them as my starts too over on the Rotoballer YouTube channel, because the better Tank Dell does, the more it's going to open up things for Nico Collins. I mean, I love this Texans offense probably more than I should. Maybe it's because I love to watch the world burn as much as anybody. So this kind of really fits my narrative. What also fits my narrative are revenge games. So I got two different revenge games here with two very different types of results. Number one, Adam Thielen is a must start this week as he goes and seeks revenge against the Minnesota Vikings. We are talking about a player that poured his heart and soul into a franchise, a player that came from Minnesota to play for the Minnesota Vikings, just to have the Minnesota Vikings toss him aside in this last offseason. No, yes, money was a factor in all this, but sometimes you just got to show love to people who love you back. And Adam Thielen loved the Minnesota Vikings. He loved the state of Minnesota, and yet they did not love him back when it mattered the most here this last offseason. So as soon as he was cut, he went into that league schedule. He's like, okay, who do the Minnesota Vikings play this year? Yeah, I want to sign with them. I want to sign with them. I want to sign. He had something. And if that wasn't the way it went down, as soon as Carolina got their schedule, found out they're playing Minnesota, you better be ready to believe that he was ready for this. Now, this kind of loses a little bit of a luster with no Andy Dalton there to feed Adam Thielen. But I think Bryce Young, he understands the assignment, right? We all know that little meme that went out there. I understood the assignment, man. Bryce Young, feed him the ball. There's money on the board here. And we've talked about the Minnesota Vikings secondary that has already allowed 710 yards, 2 wide receivers, and 4 touchdowns so far this season. Thielen, he had a pretty good week last week. 11 catches, 145 yards, and a touchdown against that Seahawks secondary. And Minnesota secondary isn't any better than the Seattle secondary. So this is a good week for Adam Thielen, regardless of his quarterback. Now, another wide receiver who has a revenge game on his mind is Calvin Ridley against the Atlanta Falcons. And guess what? I'm not feeling this the same way I was feeling Adam Thielen. I just don't have that same hooked on a Thielen when it comes to Calvin Ridley. Why? Because Atlanta is actually really good when it comes to defending wide receivers, giving up only 338 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. That puts them in the top 6 when it comes to fantasy against wide receivers so far this year. Now, you look at what Calvin Ridley did last week, it's not like he was endearing himself to fantasy managers leading up to this revenge game. What do you have, like 3 catches for 40 yards? That's not going to get the job done. I don't like this game for Calvin Ridley. I don't like this game the way I'm watching this Jacksonville Jaguars team kind of go. In fact, I'm probably sitting just about every Jaguar this week that you could possibly imagine, maybe with the exception of Evan Ingram, who was the team's best pass catcher late in the season, and he's been the best consistent pass catcher so far early in 2023. Now, Tera, we love talking about tight ends on the show. This is probably our favorite thing to talk about. So give me a must start and a must sit at the tight end position for week number 4.
You must start Luke Musgrave, who was coming on fairly decently. So this is, we're turning right around here Thursday night. Christian Watson, breaking-ish news. Won't be breaking when you guys hear it, but breaking-ish news says he's going to play. It has been confirmed that he is going to make his debut this week. But you got to remember, Romeo Doubs coming off that hamstring injury, when he did play, he was limited. I do not see a scenario where they play Christian Watson on an aggressive snap count. So to that extent, he is probably going to be utilized out there in limited snap count, key scenarios, and I don't think he will make a massive target dent in this target share with the Green Bay Packers. And so we saw Luke Musgrave come on stronger. He's garnering good target share. He's looking fantastic on the field, catching the eye of Jordan Love. And I think it's going to continue this week. It's a good matchup against Detroit. So Luke Musgrave is a must start for me and a must sit for me, man. All of them. I couldn't pick one. Sit I have a dynasty team where this is a tangent story, but go with me on this. It makes sense. I have a dynasty team, Superflex. and I lost Kyler Murray. Matt Stafford's my QB too. And beyond that, I've tried to, pull together this ragtag group of like, I've got Desmond Ritter and Jimmy Garoppolo, and it's dudes that are starting, but you just don't feel comfortable. And so I have gone with a zero QB approach in Superflex. I have opted, I will not start a secondary quarterback. If I had the option to just straight up not start Matt Stafford, I would kind of take that approach and I would still be winning. And I've been very arrogant about telling my league mates that my zero QB approach has worked, and they should try it out. Invest in all the wide receivers and running backs and just go zero QB. It'll work out. So I'm here to advocate for zero tight end. Just leave it open. Just don't start them. There we go.
Well, you probably get a lot more production of a zero tight end than we've been getting for a good portion of the season. If their name's not Sam Laporta, or if they're not dating Taylor Swift, you're probably not putting them in your starting lineup with confidence right now. Now, one guy, you talk about Justin Fields, how you kind of feel maybe not obligated to start, but you just can't quit him yet. Well, that's for me here at the tight end position this week, because I'm going right back to Kyle Pitts. He was on my start list last week. He didn't have a great game, 5 catches for 41 yards, but guess what? That was still tight end 1 when it came down to it. He was still a top 12 tight end last week, despite only 41 yards against the Detroit Lions. When we look at this, now, I don't know why I do this myself. Again, this comes back to my organized chaos, me wanting to watch the whole world type burn down. I basically swore off Kyle Pitts just a couple weeks ago, and I probably should have sworn him off after that Detroit Lions game. But this is another great matchup against this Jacksonville Jaguars team. 15.83 fantasy points per game is what the Jaguars are yielding to tight ends so far this season. They've also given up 2 touchdowns in just 3 games. It's not like Kyle Pitts has been bad. He's getting the targets. He's right up there in round participation rate. Every possible tight end category that you could be leading in, Kyle Pitts is in the top 3. Unfortunately, he's at the very bottom when it comes to catchable passes, somewhere around 53%. Going back to your zero QB, Desmond Ritter, this is a problem. You know what? Stick Cordell Patterson behind center. Let him be the quarterback. It cannot get any worse than what's going on right now. That would actually probably help. Taylor Henneke, whatever his name is, stick him under center, because at least we know that he knows how to throw the ball to someone. And I can say all this because Major's not on here to defend his guy, Desmond Ritter, who's been absolutely crushing Kyle Pitts' value. Whew. Okay, I can breathe. Now, another tight end. So I'm starting Kyle Pitts, if you couldn't pick that up right there. But you know who I'm sitting? I am sitting Mark Andrews this week. Yeah, that's right. I will start Kyle Pitts. I will start Luke Musgrave over Mark Andrews, because this Cleveland Browns defense is good. I get it. In this tight end economy, we just went off and told you to sit everybody possibly in tight end. And in this tight end economy, you really can't afford to bench Mark Andrews. Let's call it the way it is. But I look at this, and this Browns team has only allowed 7 catches for 26 yards to the tight end position. Now, look, they've played Pat Freiermuth, they've played Chigakongo, they've played Irv Smith. These aren't exactly what you consider top tight ends. But then again, last week, Mark Andrews, 7 fantasy points. That doesn't exactly scream must start either. So you can't even trust Mark Andrews, and now he's got a tough matchup against the Cleveland Browns. So for me, I'm fading him. Now, Tera, give me one sleeper as we walk away from this week's show. Who's one guy that's kind of way out there right now that you're plugging into your flex and you feel really good about?
Oh, you're putting my feet to the fire on something I was not prepared for, and I will say Marvin Mims is what I will say. And the good matchup.
One of the best yards per route run guys in the league right now.
Yes. It's a good matchup. It can work out. That is the direction that I am going to head there.
You know what? I don't hate this. I love Marvin Mims. He's a guy, I think Russell Wilson came out earlier on Wednesday afternoon and said that Marvin Mims doesn't even have a ceiling. That means he's going to the moon. Marvin Mims to the moon. I mean, I love it. I love his speed. We talked about this in the offseason, how his speed could be the difference. Cortland Sutton's that possession guy. Jerry Jeudy's that guy that can work the underneath. Marvin Mims is that guy who can exploit those seams and stretch out defenses. And if Russell Wilson gets any bit of time back there, he's going to find Mims. we've seen this Broncos offense. It's not that great. Let's be honest. It's called the way it is. I think this top 7 explosive plays that we've seen come from this Broncos offense have all been courtesy of Marvin Mims so far this season. And I'm going to give you another deep sleeper here right now, and I'm going to go with Darius Slayton versus the Seattle Seahawks. Tara, you look at those injury reports. You know how banged up Seattle's secondary is. I don't care how deep I want to go. We talk about the Seahawks team who's allowed over 760 yards and 5 touchdowns to wide receivers in just 3 games. In fact, Seattle's allowing the 4th most fantasy production to the position this year, allowing over 54 fantasy points per game. And I get it. Slayton, he hasn't exactly had one of those step-up type games, but someone on this Giants offense has to step up. So why not Slayton? He saw 6 targets against the San Francisco 49ers. That's not bad. The yardage may not be there, but the opportunity is certainly going to be there. If you've got an opportunity against one of the best defenses against wide receivers, then when you play one of the worst defenses against the wide receivers and you get that same kind of opportunity, that fantasy production is going to follow. So I feel good about Darius Slayton in that flex position here for week number 4. Now, Tara, Thursday Night Football, I know you're watching. It's your Green Bay Packers versus the Detroit Lions. You already dropped the big news there that Christian Watson is going to play. Again, he's coming back from that hamstring injury, so buyer beware. He's one of those guys that I know you want to get back in your lineup, but you just got to hold off for now. There's better options. You've gone this far right now without him in your lineup. Just pump the brakes a little bit. 2 other players that we are making sure we're keeping an eye on heading into kickoff tomorrow is going to be David Montgomery and Aaron Jones. Again, both of them are coming off hamstring type injuries of their own. These are situations that if they're in your lineup, if they're playing on Thursday Night Football, you're probably going to be putting them in your lineup as well. That being said, Thursday Night Football is so volatile. I mean, it's one of those things where if you put a guy in and they lay a goose egg, you have to look at that goose egg all week long. And I'm not sure I feel comfortable doing that. So Tara, Watson, Montgomery, and Aaron Jones, if all 3 of these guys are playing this week, is there one of them that you absolutely have to put in your lineup?
It's Aaron Jones. It's Aaron Jones for me. With hamstring injuries, I feel like I trust running backs a little bit more coming off of them immediately than I do those wide receivers. Again, I talked about the fact that I think that Christian Watson will be a little bit limited. They're probably going to scheme specific plays for him. Now, it worked out for Romeo Doubs. Because they specifically utilized him as a red zone target, and he had the touchdowns in that game where he was very minimally used, lower than 50% snap count. So that could happen with Christian Watson. It could, but I don't feel like it's necessary to risk it. I would rather go with Aaron Jones coming off of that injury because, again, we saw AJ Dillon just... It's not a competition there. I mean, he looks so bad. I think that Aaron Jones is going to start earning those goal line touches back. So this could lean aggressively in his favor. So I'm okay with even 50% Aaron Jones because it's a lot better than what AJ Dillon is given.
All right, well, there you go. There you can trust Aaron Jones if he's available this week, at least over some of these other options that could be playing on Thursday Night Football. Make sure to head over to Twitter right now. Find Miss Fantasy. Drop those questions off there because she's looking for your questions to answer here heading into each and every week. And you can catch Tara just about anywhere that you can find fantasy football information. And that includes, I think, Fantasy Alarm, CBS Sports, you name it right now, Player Profiler. Go out there and find Tera Roberts. Google her if you have to, but you're definitely going to find plenty of fantasy football information by doing so. And as always, check out the Vipercast right here on the Dynasty Vipers YouTube network. We will see you next week.